There's a lot happening internationally today, but we start with a breakthrough in the Iran nuclear talks. The U.S., 5 other nations, and Iran have agreed on the framework of a deal to limit Iran's nuclear programs. Not all the details have been hammered out, so work on a final deal will begin soon. But President Obama says this is a big day.
And I am convinced that if this framework leads to a final comprehensive deal, it will make our country, our allies, and our world safer.
If all goes as planned, the deal would mean Iran could not develop weapons-grade plutonium, among other restrictions. And the U.S. and European Union would lift sanctions. Joining me now to talk more about this and other issues is tonight's International Caucus. Jim Walsh is an international security expert at MIT and one of the few Americans to have gone to both Iran and North Korea for nuclear talks. Farouk El-Baz has been chair of the National Academy of Sciences, worked for years with NASA, served as an advisor to current and former presidents of Egypt. He's now a professor at BU. Jessica Stern is a tourism lecturer at Harvard and co-author of the new book, just out a couple of weeks, ISIS, the State of Terror. Good to see you both. Jim, let me start with you. Barack Obama said something else today. He said when fully implemented, meaning the framework, will prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. Will it?
Yeah, I think it will. And I think we have a lot of success. There's a long history here. This is not the first time we've negotiated one of these. We had one with Libya. We had arms control agreements with the Soviet Union. And I must say, I think me and my colleagues came away from this announcement surprised. Surprised at the level of detail and surprised at some of the provisions that were stronger than we expected.
One last detail. The president also said if Iran cheats, the world will know it. Will they?
Yeah. IAEA inspectors are going to be all over those facilities. They are now. Since the Joint Plan of Action, which was adopted a year ago, they've doubled the number of inspectors, and my guess is they'll have even more with a broader mandate going forward.
Farouk El-Baz, we know how Israel feels about these negotiations. We don't know yet exactly how they feel about the outcome. How does the rest of the Middle East feel? There's a lot of nervousness in a number of countries, including the country that you're from, correct?
Yes, and Saudi Arabia and the countries in the Gulf. However, the way the agreement is set, I really think that these people can no longer fear the way they used to be afraid. So
well, you're an advisor to President El-Sisi. When you go see him, I think you're going to Egypt in a few days, yes? Is he going to say what you're saying?
I think so. I think he will look at the agreement and say this is very good. I think that we were not going to see Iran with a nuclear weapon.
Well, two positive assessments here, Jessica Stern. On the campaign trail in 2007, Hillary Clinton said that Barack Obama was naive to think that personal diplomacy would ever succeed with Iran. Is she proven wrong in this deal?
I think she might be. I think that this is a moment that we can all feel much more optimistic about the region, at least today. At least for one day, we can feel pretty good.
Before we leave this, 47 Republican senators set a precedent that some think is borderline treasonous by dealing directly with the leaders of Iran. What are they going to say about this? I know they're not a monolith, but what's your best sense?
Yeah, I mean, the folks who are against this deal are against this deal. It didn't matter what was announced or what would be announced. I mean, President Netanyahu, there's no deal that he would accept, and he made it clear in his speech that there's nothing he would accept. On the point that Jessica made, and I think it's right, remember, it's not just personal diplomacy. It's not just two people that are involved here. There are the interests and the domestic politics in the two countries, or in all the countries, and that's what's going to sustain this.
Okay, Iran has a major influence on its neighbor Iraq, and this week there was progress in the fight against ISIS. Iraqi forces, with the help of the U.S. military, Shiite militias, forced ISIS out of the birthplace of Saddam Hussein, the city of Tikrit, which ISIS had controlled for more than a year. Much of the Shiite militia, by the way, are backed by Iran. Former CIA Director David Petraeus, in his first return to Iraq in years, just a couple of weeks ago, argued that those militias are a greater long-term threat to Iraq's long-term stability than ISIS is. You've just written ISIS, the State of Terror. Is General Petraeus right, Jessica Stern?
Well, I think he is right that sectarian tensions in Iraq are what made Iraq ripe, in fact, for ISIS's advance. ISIS took advantage of the fact that Maliki was anti-Sunni, and the Sunnis who had been really at the top of it, they were in the leadership, suddenly utterly disenfranchised. The sons of Iraq who were helping General Petraeus knock out the Sunni militias were promised jobs in the Maliki government and didn't get them. So ISIS is a reflection of that sectarian tension and policies. At the same time, we are not sending our ground forces over there, and Iraq's militias are prepared to fight ISIS. So we're
Does
kind of in a bind.
when you say that, by the way, most generals who I've heard speak off the record, well, at least reports about them off the record, don't agree with that assessment. Does Tikrit change things? Is that why you're all of a sudden saying American soldiers will not be, ground troops will not be necessary? Is that where you're going?
I didn't say they aren't necessary. I said we're not sending them.
Oh, as of the moment.
Right.
ISIS has been a great unifier in your region. Getting back to President El-Sisi for a moment, he's been trying to organize some Arab nations to join this fight in a big-time way. Yes. How is this Tikrit thing going to be seen?
Very, very positively, because the President Sisi now has been thinking about this for a long period of time and saying that whatever we have here of these terror actions has to stop, not just in our borders but beyond us. And he started in Libya, and he wants to do more in the east of Egypt.
Is it naive for me to think, Jim, that this deal that was struck on this nuclear issue with Iran gives these countries sitting across the table from them greater leverage vis-a-vis what's happening in Iraq and their support of these militia?
I think they're largely separate issues, and the people at the table underlined that they were largely separate issues. I think the U.S.-Iran relationship, for example, we're going to continue to agree about some stuff, Iraq, Afghanistan, we're going to disagree about other stuff like Syria. But I want to add something on this issue of the militias. I think Petraeus' premise is right and his conclusion is wrong.
Meaning what?
Meaning that the militias are a concern, but not because they're controlled by Iran. A lot of these militias have their own roots. The Sadrs have their own roots in Iraq. My concern is when you have separate forces, militia forces, untrained and not under the control of the government and the army, go in, will they engage in revenge killing against Sunnis in Tikrit, in Saddam's birthplace? If the militias commit atrocities for revenge, then it will stoke the very sectarianism that we just were discussing.
And they are already involved in atrocities, as I'm sure you know.
But despite the optimism about ISIS, my sense as a person who's not an expert in the area is this is almost like whack-a-mole. At the same time that we're all celebrating this victory in Tikrit, the hometown of Saddam Hussein, you knew Saddam Hussein and worked. Well, at least spent time with him, I know. We'll get to that in a second. I only work with him. But at the same time, they're making major advances near the capital in Syria. So isn't it one step ahead, one step back, if not more?
Absolutely, yes. We see Boko Haram pledging allegiance pledging bayat to ISIS. We see ISIS taking credit for the attack in Tunisia. Absolutely, we have not vanquished ISIS by any means, even if for the moment it looks as if we vanquished them perhaps in Tikrit.
Can we get back to Saddam Hussein? I didn't mean to suggest he was a buddy of yours, so my apologies. Well, I know you spent a decent amount of time with him.
Yes, I was pushing a scientific thing. I was asking him to start something research-wise.
Did you spend a couple of weeks in the desert with him?
No, that was Anwar Sadat.
Okay. But getting back to this for a second, are the Sunnis that were a major part of his, are they ready for a deal if the Shia are ready to deal with them?
Of course, if they get some equitable amount of something or other. The problem started with our war in Iraq with George W. And dismantling the army. So you had something over 270,000 people that were fired. And they no longer unemployed and no salary.
And with weapons.
With weapons. And they were trained and what would these people do? So they became an anti-government state, and they are the ones that are in the west of Iraq. However, now the way you see the Sunnis in Iraq, if they get some equitable amount of the pie, they will definitely agree.
Can we move to one other hotspot quickly? Today we witnessed another horrific terrorist attack in Africa. People know gunmen with the extremist Islamic group Al-Shabaab attacked a university in eastern Kenya, taking hostages, singling out non-Muslims. Approximately 150 people were killed and about 500 were ultimately rescued. What's most interesting to me, starting with you, Jessica, and then we'll go down the line, Al-Shabaab has pledged allegiance to Al-Qaeda. Let's go to another part of Africa, and we know that Boko Haram has pledged allegiance to ISIS. Are these international entanglements of terrorist groups something that should worry us more than even the individual groups themselves? Do you know what I mean?
I guess, honestly, not really. Maybe somebody else does.
These liaisons. I don't even know what it means to forge or pledge alliance to ISIS or Al-Qaeda. Does that matter, or is that just rhetoric?
Has, for a long time, wanted to be accepted into the Al-Qaeda fold. And
what's the practical manifest? What does that mean that they've pledged allegiance to Al-Qaeda, or that Boko Haram has pledged allegiance
It gives
to
them
ISIS. What is it?
status. I
No,
think
it will give them money too, because Al Qaeda at one time had
Had
a lot
money.
of money.
So there is operational
course.
implication.
Of course,
Yes,
if
do you
I
agree with that?
Well, anytime Jessica says something about terrorism, I say what she said. And
What
so
she
I'm going to
said.
go with that. But I must say, I think a lot of these announcements are more symbolic and ideological than really substantive. I don't know how much they're going to matter on the ground. Is Al-Shabaab going to suddenly have now international aspirations? I don't think so.
Fair enough. Thanks all three of you. Jim, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Farouk, pleasure
Thank you
as
very much.
always.
Thank
Jessica,
you.
thanks so much. Good luck with your book.